Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. If you've ever listened to music, you're probably familiar with things like verses and choruses. If you've studied songwriting, you may have even learned formulas for them. For instance, lots of songs go verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, done, and that works great. But as a theorist, it's not good enough. What is a verse? What's a chorus? Why do they work? And what roles do they play? The answers vary from style to style and even from song to song, but there's some commonalities we can look at to help us understand why these ideas are, well, everywhere. Let's start with a chorus. Depending on structure and style, this could also be called a refrain or a hook, and those names kind of give you a clue about what a chorus is. It's a repeated section that's usually the catchiest, most memorable part of the song. But definitions are easy. The interesting question is why? What's the point of repeating ourselves? Well, it all comes down to memorability. The chorus is unique but familiar, and it sticks deep in the listener's head. It gives the song its identity. It's the part that everyone can sing along to and that every fan knows by heart. This is obviously great for marketing since it creates a sort of musical fingerprint, but it's actually really valuable from an artistic standpoint too. The chorus is like a quick sketch of the entire song. It often tells a short, abstract version of the story, hitting broad emotional points instead of concrete narrative details. It's more about how you feel, and a good chorus usually serves as a sort of emotional apex, providing context for the rest of your song. Typically, because the story is simpler here, the music gets bigger to compensate. Ranges broaden, new instruments and voices come in, the melody gets more acrobatic, and everyone gets louder. In fact, the name chorus comes from the background singers that tend to join in for this section. All of this helps build that sense of memorability too, because the chorus is where the most interesting things tend to happen. In contrast, verses are often fairly straightforward. That's because they have a different role. They tell the actual story. Verses fill in the details that the chorus hinted at. They're much more involved lyrically, so they tend to back off musically to avoid overwhelming the listener. This usually means more restrained melodies and quieter, simpler accompaniment, letting the faster, more complicated lyrics take the spotlight. But that's not to say you can't do anything interesting in a verse. They're a great place for background lines and complex harmonies since the untrained ear isn't likely to be all that distracted by them. You just have to make sure the things you add stay in the background because the verse is not their time to shine. Another common mistake with verses is to write the first one, then just copy and paste the music for all the rest of them, changing only the lyrics from verse to verse. This is tempting because we just said the background parts don't really matter, but, well, you still need some variety. The chorus probably isn't changing much, so if the verse isn't either, then I've heard everything your song has to offer in the first minute or so, and the rest is going to be repetitive and boring. A good arranger will often add variation between verses either by changing the melody slightly or by adding new instruments or background lines to help the song build. It's tricky because you don't want to overwhelm the narrative, but you've got to have some forward motion. And once you've run out of ways to make your verses different, there's one last trick up a songwriter's sleeve. The bridge. This is a section that's completely different both musically and lyrically from the rest of the song. It helps break up the monotony of repeated verses and choruses, injecting some new life just as the listener starts to get bored. There are lots of different kinds of bridges, but they tend to have two functions. First, they introduce new musical ideas. This can mean new melodies, new chords, new instruments, or even a new key. Remember, at this point your audience is kind of sick of your verse and chorus, so the less like those it sounds, the better. Bridges also usually recontextualize the story. This is a bit harder to define, but bridges tend to take a slightly different perspective on events. They give you another way of looking at it. Maybe it provides some missing information that helps you see things differently, or maybe it jumps forward in time to a point where the wounds aren't so fresh. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Narratives are endlessly complex and there's no shortage of ways to tell them. But if you're just writing it like an extra verse, you're probably wasting an opportunity. Of course, those are only a few of the types of sections that can make up a song. We haven't covered intros, breakdowns, solos, pre-choruses, or interludes, to name a few. But when it comes to storytelling, these are some of the most important ones, and besides, we had to leave something to make another video about. Until then, thanks for watching. If you want to help make these videos possible, please consider supporting 12 Tone on Patreon. You can also join our mailing list for scans of all our episodes, like, share, comment, subscribe, and keep on rockin'.